MegaHerzzz. You're listening to MegaHerzzz on 4ZZZ.
You're listening to MegaHerzzz here on 4ZZZ 102.1 FM. My name is Claire, my pronouns are she, her.
My name is Charlotte, my pronouns are she, they.
But first, we just wanted to acknowledge that we're broadcasting here on unceded Yagara and Turrbal land.
Claire and I were talking. I read a wonderful article this morning titled Mother's Day Has Deeply Radical Roots by Liza Featherstone for Jacobin magazine. So it was Mother's Day yesterday, and we've kind of just been talking about what that means for people. And I think mothers are like incredibly important part of feminist history. And so I thought I'd read out some of this article because it was like a lot of things that I didn't know about, and I didn't know about the deeply radical roots of Mother's Day. So I'm going to read out some excerpts from this article if you'll allow me. So Liza says, Mother's Day began in 1858 when Anne Jarvis, an Appalachian housewife and mother to at least 11 children, organised Mother's Work Days to improve sanitation in a time where polluted water and disease-bearing pests were major causes of death in poor communities like hers. Jarvis was also a peace activist who organised Mother's Day work clubs to care for soldiers on both sides of the Civil War. When Anne Jarvis died in 1905, her daughter, Anna Jarvis, campaigned for an official Mother's Day to honour her own mother's lifelong activism. In 1914, her efforts succeeded. Congress passed a resolution making Mother's Day official. The holiday also has an anti-war history. In 1872, after the brutal Franco-Prussian War, Julia Ward Howe, a peace activist, established the day for mothers and anti-war protest. Her vision was an internationalist one, calling for a general Congress of women without limit of nationality to promote the alliance of the different nationalities, the amicable settlement of international questions, the great and general interests of peace. Howe organised protests and political conferences on the day, also calling it a women's peace festival for many years. For much of the 20th century, the political ideals of Anne Jarvis and Julia Ward Howe were eclipsed as Mother's Day became associated with kind of trendy hallmark commercialism. Anna Jarvis herself became disgusted with it by the early 1920s, even boycotting florists and picketing at a confectioners' convention to protest Mother's Day price gouging on flowers and sweets. But in the 1950s and 60s, Women Strike for Peace held Mother's Day actions around the country to protest the life-threatening nuclear arms race between the United States and the Soviet Union. The group had a respectable middle-class image, often protesting while wearing white gloves and pushing strollers. The anti-communist House Un-American Activities Committee, however, took a great interest in the group because of the many communists involved in the group or socially associated with it. Indeed, a report on the group noted that while communists use the word peace, it may sound wholesome like mum and apple pie, but a critique of capitalism is implied. Another group known for Mother's Day actions was the National Welfare Rights Organisation, made up of poor women demanding the economic right to survival and often much more. As sociologist Wilson Sherman has found, welfare rights activists often had a radical critique of wage labour and a vision of society in which everyone was entitled to comfort, leisure and pleasure, whether they worked for a capitalist boss or not. The NWRO's most famous Mother's Day action was a march in Washington on May 12, 1968, led by Coretta Scott King, just after the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr., organised with the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. The march had been intended to launch the King's Poor People's campaigns to demand more government support for the poor, but the NWRO also used the occasion to draw attention to its efforts to repeal the 1967 Social Security Amendments, which added work incentives to the program. In addition to a march through Washington, D.C., the NWRO also held smaller actions around the country. Members of the WSP joined them. So I thought that was super interesting, and I hadn't heard of any of that kind of stuff. And
I feel like with Mother's Day, people don't really talk much about its like origins, or it's kind of very focused on just like the fact that it's like celebrating my mom. People are posting. It's very like intimate and personal.
Yes, I think so.
Looking at the broader history is like so
and like knowing that it had an activist kind of beginning, I think is awesome, and I think makes sense. Like I think mothers and women obviously, but I think mothers in particular have been involved in activist kind of movements for forever, and I think they hold such an important place in society that it only makes sense. So
I found this article here on the ABC about like history of Mother's Day in like an Australian context, and it's so interesting because it's talking a lot about that like second wave, like in the 70s, because you know what you're saying, like it began with like the activism like, earlier on, but then in like the later waves they were like, it's so funny because it kind of then went against it, like the like in the 70s, like I think this is talking about like in Adelaide they have like a whole group of women's liberationists, and they'll be like, oh well, like this is enforcing the dominant model of like men as like breadwinners and like the woman in the house as the mother, and then being like, oh well, Mother's Day is like reinforcing this problem and it's like rooted in hypocrisy or something. So it's really interesting how that was a whole movement in Australia.
Yeah, I mean, which obviously makes sense, and you know, I think obviously some of like the commercialism that we touched on in that article definitely does kind of come, you know, it's like get your mum flowers and breakfast. And, you know, and I think there is probably a lot of that stuff that goes with International Women's Day, where it's like mothers have to organise their own, you know, kind of Mother's Day gifts and things like that. So whether it is, you know, I feel like it is in that way reinforcing, you know, the role of women in the home and all that.
And it's also interesting in Australia, I think back then in the 70s, it was like the Mother's Day, like feminist movements were tied into like children, like childcare as a thing. So it was like a lot about asking for like affordable or free childcare linked into Mother's Day.
Yeah, because that's such a massive feminist issue, is affordable childcare. I mean, that means that mothers can be outside the home and, you know, have access to economic security and things like that. Yeah,
they had a whole like slogan, and it was like on the article it says the slogan for like the whole like movement was like free mom, free dad, free me, free childcare.
Oh, I like that. That's really good.
So it's really interesting because this is like, it's so specific to like Adelaide, like this article.
So there was a lot of activism in Adelaide specifically.
I think so, and it's talking, it also links into like family violence.
Yeah, of course.
It was talking about how like at the time it was a lot of like, you know, like mothers and children in those like situations, and like in like women's refuges, like half of the residents were children as well. So
yeah, I mean, a lot of the women who escape domestic and family violence have children.
And they like had a whole bunch of like pamphlets that got preserved. So they're like talking about these pamphlets, and then it was saying like, so as to like not suffocate their children, women must like renounce their martyrdom and redefine themselves as a human being and not just mom.
Wow.
Yeah,
that's strong words.
So
that's very interesting.
And then there was like a whole like movement of like anti-mother, anti-child.
Oh. What does that mean?
Like for like the labels or something, it's like opponents of like women's liberation, and then they were just like casting this movement as an anti-mother movement because they were like,
wow, it's going deep.
History.
Yeah, there's actually like so much history to Mother's Day, which I just had never thought of. So
but this article's so interesting. If anyone wants to read, hang on, let me find the name of it.
Yeah, what's the name? The article that I read was called Mother's Day Has Deeply Radical Roots by Liza Featherstone, and that was for Jacobin magazine, who I also hadn't heard of, who do really cool stuff.
Yeah, and the one I'm reading is on ABC. It's called A Human Being, Not Just Mom, the woman's liberationist who fought for the rights of mothers and children, by Isabel Barrett Mayering, from 2022, so kind of recent.
Yeah, some interesting stuff. Definitely go look that up, and, you know, obviously shout out to all the mums who are listening to us today.
Absolutely, and hopefully...
and all the different roles that you occupy and have occupied throughout history. I think you guys are incredible.
I think it's so nice how like Mother's Day is becoming so much more of like less defined, like what it's meant to be and how people spend it, and like who's celebrated. It's so much like it's all shifting and fluid. So it's
and I feel like I see a lot of sentiment on social media that's like, this is for all, you know, the women who are trying to be mums. This is for women who've lost their mum. You know, I think it is quite a broad and inclusive. You know, I mean, I think it's trying to at least be an inclusive movement.
Like not even just like birth mothers, but just like found families.
Well. I mean, like mothering is such a broad kind of concept and term, and I think
it's like a day of appreciation, which is nice.
I think it's really beautiful. And shout out to my own mum and all the other kind of mother-like figures in my life. I think you're all so important to me.
Yeah, but here on MegaHerzzz, we make it a commitment to report on the femicide in Australia, because it's such an important topic, and I feel like it's so like brushed over by the media a lot of the time.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so every show we do a segment here on femicide, but just giving a heads up and a warning that if you need to tune out, you know, take care of yourself, and you can tune back in a few minutes, because this will be a bit of a heavy topic. We'll be talking, you know, about femicide, about domestic violence, or just other forms of violence against women. But we'll read out some helplines in a second once we've gotten through it. I'm just going to pass over to Charlotte.
Yeah, so this week there was one woman killed. So a woman named Carron Scott lost her life to violence. She was killed by a man driving dangerously and under the influence, who then fled the scene without getting her help. The 31-year-old man is charged with her manslaughter and other offences. Carron was a 60-year-old aged care nurse, a beloved wife, mum of two, and adored member of her community. She had only celebrated her wedding anniversary weeks earlier. Her husband on social media said, "You were taken from us in an instant, just minding your business on the way to work. Right now, we are all feeling lost without you. Thank you for a wonderful 25 years together." One of her co-workers also said, "Carron was the most amazing caring nurse who went above and beyond every day. She looked after many elderly people in their darkest days with comfort and love, so loved by all who knew her and worked with her." A GoFundMe has been set up to help Carron's family as they move forward without their precious human. Please consider donating to their GoFundMe. The link is in Cheryl Moody's Instagram bio, or you can go to www.gofundme.com/F/Carron-Scott-nurse-aged care. We'll put it in the show notes for this episode as well.
Yeah.
Rest in power, Carron.
Yeah, I feel like this is especially such an important case to note because we've talked about in the past on the show how, you know, violence with vehicles in Australia, the way the law perceives it doesn't count it as important as weapons or other forms of violence.
And Cheryl even says in her post that she always includes women and children lost to manslaughter, and that she says that vehicles are weapons when used the wrong way. They're as dangerous as firing a gun randomly into a crowd.
Yeah, because I feel like a lot of these cases are undermined where people it's it's a driving accident and then they end up focusing on the driver a lot, being he was just driving and then it's accidents happen or people be anyone could do this, but then it's such a serious thing and it's so often overlooked.
Yeah, and especially it said in the post that he was driving under the influence, obviously, and he also hit her without getting any help, which is pretty clear,
It's
I'm that is violence against women. That's
and
so awful.
it kind of just shows such a just a general even the way it's perceived, the lack of respect, the way that people approach.
Yeah, and dangerous driving, I think, is quite a gendered issue as well. We've touched on that with this show. I think it's a lot more normalized for men, I think, to drive dangerously, to speed, to drive under the influence.
And this happening here in Queensland as well. I just wanted to highlight some helplines and support services. If this is something that, is quite, since it is a heavy topic, there is helplines you can call. 1-800-RESPECT, 1-800-737-732, or there's a women's crisis line, 1-800-811-811. If you're Indigenous, you could call 13-YARN, which is 139276. And there's also the men's helpline, 1300-766-491.
How do you get your daily fix of 4ZZZ?
Maybe you tune in during your daily commute in the car.
You could just stream it on our website at 4zzz.org.au.
Or maybe you've downloaded the Community Radio Plus app to listen on the go.
You can even ask your smart speakers to play 4ZZZ or Z Digital. Give it a go!
However you're tuned in.
Thanks for listening to 4ZZZ.
We're going to read out some information for, just a lot of events coming up in the next week or so. So starting off, I think this is the one that is closest to today. On Wednesday, we have Femme and Friends is returning for their second, I think, kind of showing of this event.
Yeah.
So this is a night for femme and gender non-conforming artists to showcase new and existing work. So I believe they've got possibly an art exhibition at the same time. So they say this is a place for connection, collaboration and community. Their lineup will include Miko Shan, Jelly, Ofa, Blue Stockings and Esther Skyscraper. And it will be hosted at Mirabel Industries in West End, which is still a pretty new venue, I think. But it was, if I'm not mistaken, created by the people who made It's Still a Secret. And Can You Keep a Secret?
Yeah. They have the huge disco ball in the room.
Yeah. I went there because I I like hadn't seen it before, and then I sort of, it's like down a funny little corridor that you don't really even notice.
It's like
and I was
right
like,
next to where the beer used
yes,
to
I was
be.
like, wait, what is down here? What's happening? And it's very exciting. It's a really beautiful.
The
venue.
decorations are crazy in that place. It's so pretty.
Yes, well, and like It's Still a Secret was so like that. Like it was like gorgeous 70s kind of vintage. So yeah, that's happening on Wednesday from 7 p.m. to 11 p.m. And we'll post all the details on our Instagram so that you can buy tickets. But yeah, otherwise look them up on Instagram. And then if you need other stuff to do on the weekend, so Joy and Whimsy and Echo and Bounce are hosting kind of like a big weekend-long affair called Bonanza. So Bonanza is a community-centric affair, a place for connection, conversation, and multimodal art. This series has a focus on queer and femme mixed genre musos in so-called Australia, with an emphasis on safety, respect, and zero tolerance for antisocial behaviour. We'd love to hear it. So you can go to Femme and Friends on Wednesday, and then on Thursday, on May 14th, you have the opening night of Peach World, a collaborative art exhibition between Split Level World and Peachy Lena. The exhibition focuses on return, connection, and longing, and it will be held from 6 p.m. until late. And then on the Friday, you can go to another sweet evening of music from 6 p.m. to 11 p.m. with three-piece band Blue Communications from Nam, celebrating the release of their self-titled album. And then they will be supported by local bands Primitive Motion and Scraps. So yeah, you can also see the Peach World exhibition this night as well. And then finally on the Saturday, they've got a cute market day from 10 to 3 p.m. It'll be a mix of local artists, hobbyists, side hustles, and secondhand clothes knickknacks soundtracked by local DJs. Very exciting. Sounds like a jam-packed week. I think you've got more for us though, Claire.
Yeah, I mean, just tonight, I think you said you're going to this, but there is an author from Japan coming to Brisbane to do a talk about her new book. And I think a lot of her writing is focused, on like kind of feminist like ideas.
Yes, yeah.
Like,
she's incredible. Miko Kawakami? Is that her name?
Kawakami, yeah.
Yeah. She is an incredible feminist author. Yeah, all her books are translated from Japanese, I believe. Breasts and Eggs was like her kind of big feminist debut. Yeah, and it focused a lot. Like it kind of talked a lot about, it was like a split story, but it was kind of touching on like plastic surgery, cosmetic surgery, and then also the kind of idea of donor eggs and like freezing your eggs and just all the kind of thoughts and feelings that comes around that and being a mother and kind of all those different things, and she's an incredible author. So she's debuting her new book tonight.
New book. I think it's called Sisters in Yellow.
Yes, at the old museum. So I'm not sure if there's still tickets available, but if there are, you should definitely come along because she's incredible, and I'll be there.
And there's heaps of like interesting like book events and like kind of like going around in Brisbane. I feel there's such like a little book sphere.
Yes, absolutely.
There's an essay club in the Institute of Modern Art that's happening, and it looks really interesting because it's focused on the guest speaker. Hang on, let me find the name. But it's a guest speaker from the UQ like art museum who's a curator, awesome. And they're talking about like how European languages influence art in Queensland. So it's very specific to the local art environment. And like talking about how like you can predict like kind of how you interact with Indigenous like art and cultures in that sense through like language and in the like Brisbane curatorial spaces, how you can curate in the way that like influences culture and like preservation.
Wow, that sounds amazing. Yeah.
So if that sounds interesting, definitely like look into it. I'm not sure if there's
When's
still tickets.
That one?
I think it's Wednesday next week, maybe, or the week after. Yeah. One of the Wednesdays coming up.
One of the Wednesdays. So, if there's still tickets next week, we'll shout it out again next week.
Yeah, exactly.
To give you a little reminder.
And I think it's like a monthly or like a recent, like, kind of regular thing. So, definitely check out Institute of Modern Art. They have heaps of, like, music events as well.
So
and,
cool.
Like,
where are they? Where is the venue?
It's in the Valley.
Yeah, wow.
Unexpected.
So
but it's just, like, in
we
the
were just
Valley.
talking before how there's been a period of time where I think a lot of the venues kind of closed down, and a lot of new ones are kind of popping up in the past couple months. So I'm really excited to see where that goes. And
like book clubs are like popping up everywhere as well.
Yeah, there's so many book clubs. Yeah,
Echo and Bounce, like where you said the joint
Postscript Club, I believe they're called. Yeah. But Avid Reader's got like 16 different book clubs or something. So you can always find one that's
really cool.
suited for you. I go to an Avid Reader book club and I love it. Like, it's just such a great kind of community thing to do and meet new people and talk about art and books. And
Exactly.
And there's a radical reading group as well that meets in Brisbane that I've been to a couple times that are great.
You can like find a lot of like radical events. There's something called BREAD. It's like Brisbane Radical Events.
Cool.
Something. Yeah, it's like
something.
acronym, but it's like a mailing list, and they like kind of send you all of like the meetings and like events happening.
So if you're craving community or just wanting to find more like-minded people, like I so recommend going to these things. Like you can go alone to all these things. Like I think they're
it's all like really welcoming communities.
Yeah, super welcoming, and it's such a thing that you can go do by yourself because you're all kind of talking about a centralized topic.
Exactly,
that makes it really easy to make friends. Yeah.
There's another music event I wanted to highlight because the description is so interesting, and I feel like it's so on point to MegaHerzzz and what we do here. But the event's called Kilo Girl, and the bio for the event says a kilo girl is a material unit that for a short time in the mid 20th century measured computer power based on women whose work underpinned the computer's operations. So a kilo girl represents the computer power of 1,000 women doing an hour's worth of work. And it's like this kind of theming of this event is, that historic marginalization of women in electronics and computing and how that kind of reverberates in society even now. So like the whole event is a bunch of like like gender diverse, like femme and like trans electronic and like experimental musicians.
So cool.
And the really funny thing is the tickets for this event, it's $20 for cis men and $15 for anyone else.
Period.
And it's at a new venue because we were talking about how like there's like limited spaces in Brisbane and stuff, but there's always stuff popping up.
What's this one?
It's a new venue in Chermside called The Little Gig.
So cute. Chermside, that's such a funny spot.
Yeah, it's such like unexpected.
I love a little suburban gig spot. I think it's easy to drive to. I don't know, maybe that looks me old, but it's like easy to get to stuff in the suburbs and try something new, a bit closer to home.
But and then something else I wanted to highlight just real quick is more on that like activism side, but because we talk a lot about Victoria Park here, in Baranban, and everything that's happening there with them wanting to tear it down, like the government for the Olympics, and how it's such like an important sacred space for Indigenous people here in Brisbane. So there is a Fill the Park event to defend living heritage, and it's inviting mob and accomplices to camp out at the Guru Camp Embassy on 29th of May to the 1st of June. And it says it's, a lot of yarns around the fire about decolonization and human rights, self-determination, and a lot of like learning about Indigenous culture. So if you're mob and you want to go check it out, it's definitely a big like community event that seems like it's really like, important as well.
This sounds awesome. Yeah. And we'll make sure we'll post and put all that stuff in the show notes because that was a lot to keep up with. There's a lot of things coming up.
Keeps happening.
Yeah.
Isn't that what feminism is about?